And let's start and move to our next session. The name of the session is Scaling Early Stage Startups, the talk of investor, Accelerate in Asia, and portfolio company, ProjectPro. The speakers are Craig Dikson from Accelerate in Asia, Binni Мэттьюз, co-founder and CEO of ProjectPro. And this session will be moderated by Dina Karakash. She's a portfolio manager at iidf.vc, and this session will be in English. Okay, let's go.
Hi, everyone. We welcome you to the talk with the investor Accelerating Asia and the startup ProjectPro, which I believe should bring us more perspective on the same topics. After the discussion, we would have a Q&A. So, dear audience, please write your questions. So let me briefly introduce the speakers first. Craig Dikson is the co-founder, entrepreneur in residence, and program director for Accelerating Asia, as well as general partner at Accelerating Asia Ventures. Accelerating Asia is an award-winning startup accelerator that scouts and propels the best founders in the region and provides pre-Series A startups with the resources and investment to facilitate growth. Craig and his co-founder also deliver high-impact programs in partnership with multinationals and governments to optimize startup engagement. Craig has a passion for building a more efficient startup ecosystem in Southeast Asia, focusing on standardization of investment terms and fairness between startups, founders, and investors. I should also mention that Craig has an entrepreneurial background, and there is much more to say, but I will let Craig guide you through his background. Binni is the co-founder and chief project officer at ProjectPro. He is focused on helping people get work done faster. Binni is building a future where pre-built, reusable work models result in happier users and careers. He is also a part-time YouTuber and school teacher. There is much more to say about Billy as well, but I let him guide you through his experience as well. So Craig, Billy, I'm happy that you have joined us today. Thank you.
Thanks, Dina.
Craig, we'll start with you if you don't mind. Craig, could you please introduce yourself and Accelerating Asia to the audience?
Yeah, thanks so much, Dina, and thank you everybody for having us. It's great to see Dimitri here. I have to say first, I've known Dimitri for a long time, and he's been a great supporter of the ecosystem here in Southeast Asia. So hey, Dimitri. So shout out to Dimitri and Cento and all the folks that are supporting it. Really happy to have you guys all connecting the dots here. So back to Accelerating Asia. Yeah, so we are one of the only independent accelerator VC models in Southeast Asia. And we accelerate what we call pre-Series A companies. And we help connect the dots between startups that have very early traction and getting them kind of optimized and professionalized and ready for institutional investment from our venture capital partners in the region. We have invested in 25 startups over the past 2 years. We'll be accelerating and investing in 25 more this year. And we focus on a number of different verticals and geographies. And in addition to the accelerator, which Binni has gone through recently and can talk to his kind of experience there, as you mentioned, we also work with a lot of universities, multinationals, and governments and help them connect into the startup ecosystem and help them support startups on their own initiatives as well. And so a few other initiatives we have is supporting angel investors through educating them and helping them feel more comfortable to become angel investors and write those checks. Which of course supports the kind of grassroots level of the startup ecosystem, helping startups get access to more mentorship and capital and more scaling ability. So I think that's probably enough about Accelerating Asia, but thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about what we're doing here. Oh, sorry, Dina, I think you're muted.
Sorry for that. So yeah, very exciting. A lot of things you have done so far. So do you have standard terms for investment size and corresponding share in the company? And do you have an exceptions to this rule and follow-on rounds?
Yeah, sure. So we're a little bit different from kind of the venture capital model. So what we do is We pick around 10 startups to join each cohort, and we have 2 cohorts per year. We typically get about 500 applications per cohort. And so when the startups come in, due to the number of applications, we can't do extensive long due diligence like a VC would. And so the way we invest is we start out with a smaller check of $50,000 to $100,000. And then through the course of the program, we're interacting with the founders and learning a lot more about their businesses and their potential. And of course, the interest that other investors, including VCs, have in those. And then what we do is we take a minority of those companies and we give them a second, usually larger check to raise our stake on their cap table. And so it's kind of a 2-part series there. We also do have capital to continue investing in future rounds in pro rata alongside future investors that are going to lead those rounds.
Okay, it looks like we follow the same standards and the same strategy. So I would love to switch to ProjectPro and learn how have you found ProjectPro and why have you believed in the team?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, shout out to Binny for wearing the Accelerating Asia shirt. Appreciate the support there. There you go. Yeah, there we go, matching. Another perk of the program is free t-shirts. So ProjectPro, I think, was a great example of the perfect match for us. Binny came in and the team came in with a really good product solving a very large problem. The team had the requisite skill sets required to execute on that in the founding team. And there was early traction and obvious traction and customer engagement and love for the product. At the same time, I think, Binny and the team did have some challenges around certain things that we were, I think, well equipped to fill in those gaps. And through the course of those few months, it seemed obvious that there was a really nice transition, both in the increase and acceleration of the revenue traction and the sales traction of ProjectPro, as well as the deep interest in institutional VCs to have conversations with Binny about potential investment down the road. And those are kind of the high potential startups that we look for that still have some gaps to fill that we know we can help and take them to the next level. That creates kind of that win-win relationship. And I think ProjectPro is like a perfect example of that. And we're so happy that they joined the program and the results have been really incredible. And we're happy to be on their cap table and part of their team as well.
Okay, so it looks like it's the right moment to switch to Bini. Bini, you have an impressive track record so far, a serial entrepreneur with international experience and a background in IB, as well as a STEM degree. Could you please guide us through your experience? And moreover, it is interesting to know what has made you start ProjectPro and which markets you have started with.
Sure, Dina, thank you for those kind words. See, there's a couple of reasons why we started ProjectPro. One of the things was that for a very long time, my co-founder Omer and I, we have had this belief system that almost all real learning comes outside the classroom when you actually do things and not inside the classroom. And both of us have had personal stories to that effect. So for example, in my case, I studied computer science, my undergrad and master's, but my first job was in finance, like you said, in investment banking. But one of the things I noticed on the job was, even though I knew almost no finance, the right bankers would just teach me just the right stuff and give me the right tools to make me effective at my work, so that somebody like me who had no finance would be as effective at my work as somebody who just went through college studying 4 years of finance. So that was that had a pretty big impact on me, the whole idea of doing something in jobs and careers and things like that. I think the second thing was, my mother was a teacher, so I kind of grew up with education and career and things like that around me for a while. So I think these were the two motivations to do something to help people with their careers and jobs. And that's kind of how we started. And the whole idea of ProjectPro, in fact, came from a previous business we were running, where we were offering online courses. That's kind of how the idea of ProjectPro came. Do you want me to talk about how we came up with ProjectPro?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, so Dina, to put things into perspective, right? See, if you look at the last 10 years, and if you take software developers, every year, the world spends about $20 billion on making software developers productive. You're giving them courses, online training, offline training, and all of that stuff for the last 10 years. But 10 years back, if you did a survey, you would find out that 75% of software developers will tell you there's a skill gap. Now, 10 years later, after spending $200 billion, if you do a survey, that pie chart looks the same. There is still 75% of software developers who will tell you there's a skill gap. And the reason, and you know, we were a part of the problem because we were offering all these courses and we were thinking it helps people, and it does to a certain extent. And while we were offering these courses, what we realized that people would take our courses, they would go get a job, and they would start working on their projects, and they would get stuck. And they would bring those projects back to us and say, hey, can you help me solve this project so I can go give it to my boss, impress them, and I can go home. So we would help them a little bit on an ad hoc basis, and then we productized it. And that's how the idea for ProjectPro came, which is no matter how much you teach somebody, they're stuck at work. And the simple insight is if somebody is stuck at work, just do the work and give it to them. But templatize it, productize it, so there's a scalable business there. That's kind of what we do at ProjectPro.
So what exactly the solution and business model?
So our target customers, Dina, are software developers, more specifically data scientists. And what we give them is we give them a repository of pre-built templates that they can take and reuse. So if a data scientist is working on, let's say, a customer churn problem, there is no need to start from scratch. I mean, 80% of the customer churn problems in the world are the same. Somebody has done it before. So they take our pre-built model and they customize it to their needs. It's a yearly subscription. Developers pay about $250 to access these projects for a yearly subscription.
Great. So with which markets have you started?
See, today, we have a community of about 120 developers from about 42 countries. Sorry, 120,000 developers from about 42 countries. But most of our customers, I would say, are in the United States, India, and Southeast Asia right now.
Okay, quite international team. And I also see that you have two main offices in the US and India. Is it correct?
That's correct, yeah.
How have you met Craig and Accelerating Asia, and why have you decided to join?
That's an interesting question. You know, and I've responded to Craig's point about they didn't have time to do proper due diligence. We actually went through 17 interviews, I remember. But the way I know Craig is a very good friend of mine, this entrepreneur. He was his ex-McKinsey associate partner. So his startup had gone through an accelerator that Craig was running before. And he basically introduced me to Craig. And I wasn't really looking to go through such a process, but then this friend of mine introduced me to Craig, and that's kind of how I met Craig. So I think that was one. I heard very good things. I think the second reason why I decided to do this was, you know, like you said, most of our customers are international. So I believe that help that is from outside India, like from Accelerating Asia, will really give us an international exposure. That was the two. And I think the third reason was, you know, as we went through this 17 interview process, I got the sense that we will actually get tangible benefits out of the process, and not just intangible wisdom, but very tangible benefits. So I really think these are the three reasons.
Okay, it looks like it has been painful with the number of interviews, but it works out. Okay, so Bini, we heard a lot of positive feedbacks about Accelerating Asia, and has it actually met your expectation, and how have ProjectPro and you personally benefited from the program and having Accelerating Asia on board?
Sure. See, I think one of the really critical things in a startup's journey is timing, right? There's so much about timing, and it's not just market timing, there's lots of other timing, which is so many things have to come together at the same focal point for a great outcome to come out of it. If each of these things did not occur parallelly and they occur in a linear fashion, you may not have the outcome you wanted to have. So in our case, I think Accelerating Asia helped us get many things together into a compressed time frame. And how that worked is, see, before we started Accelerating Asia, we had a little bit of product market fit, and we were just beginning to scale. The first thing that helped us was there were these mentor sessions every week where there would be an SEO expert, there would be an email expert, there would be a YouTube expert, giving us very tangible growth hacks. That really helped us. In fact, our SEO traffic grew like 20% because of one of those hacks we did. That helped. The second thing is there are these weekly stand-ups where every Monday morning you're reporting and people are helping each other and people are grilling you with questions. And just that intensity of having to report in a session is very helpful. You get more work done. The intensity of execution is great. And the third thing is the investor lineup. I recall we were talking to investors every second week from the beginning of the program. So it's a 90-day program. So towards the end of the program, our traction is great. We are executing very well, and investors line up. So that's kind of how it worked for us, and we're fortunate to have multiple term sheets at the end of that process.
So how has mentorship worked? Did you ask for the help, or you had just a certain mentors you have to work with?
There's two things. One is there is a lineup of mentors that's already pre-decided who kind of give these sessions, and then based on that, we reach out and say, hey, I need more time with this mentor. So that is helpful. But I also recall one of the other things that was really helpful was, these sessions are not so much, they're more workshops. They're not, somebody talking and you listening. The mentor is literally going company by company and helping you troubleshoot very specific problems. So that was very helpful.
Okay, thanks a lot. Craig, let's come back to you. As an entrepreneur yourself, you know what it is like to be on the other side and which kind of support is mostly required to grow the startup from idea to exit. Could you tell us about how you work with the founders and teams, and how much time do you usually devote to each team, either such distribution?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think Bini already answered all the questions about what we do. So no, I'm just kidding. Thank you, Bini, for all that information. Yeah, I think Bini went into it a lot. So essentially our program starts out with a little bit of templates as far as what we're going to do. But what we also do during the first part of the program is we do a fairly deep analysis of each team in the cohort and the cohort as a whole, and try to identify what their needs are and what their gaps might be. And that's when we reach out to our mentor network and our friends in the investor community and other folks like our corporates. And we bring people in to address those specific problem sets. And so as the program goes forwards and we get to know our startups and founders better, it becomes more and more customized. And I think some of those examples that Bini threw out around SEO and kind of the YouTube marketing BD stuff were specific people we brought in once we got to know the cohort and the startups like Bini better. On a weekly basis, I think we're one of the only programs that has 2 full-time entrepreneurs in residence who've raised capital, scaled businesses, and exited, at least in this region. And so you get to meet with us every single week, and we deep dive into the, the specific challenges that your startup has. And then through those meetings, hopefully we can help you directly, but we also do a lot of reach outs to folks that we know can potentially help you if we cannot. And so that's a weekly basis. And then when we do surveys on the value of our program to the founders who've participated, one of the largest drivers of value is the other founders in the cohort helping each other. And so I think this is huge. Running a business is a very lonely journey as a CEO and a co-founder. There's a lot of emotional ups and downs, and there's a lot of things that are really hard and challenging. And having other founders that are in the same boat with you and that are at a similar stage of maturity as you are, helping each other, suggesting improvements and introducing new solutions and maybe knowledge that you don't have access to is extremely valuable. And I think that goes to the weekly stand-up that we do with all of the founders every single Monday morning. And then of course we bring in, our venture capital friends as well. So we have most of the top tier VCs in the region come and do private sessions with our startups, give them feedback on their pitches and kind of their business models and the likelihood for interest and investment from their side of it. And all of that provides kind of just so much feedback and so many actionable insights, as Bini kind of referenced, that you can dramatically accelerate your progress and de-risk your startup's growth and create massive efficiency around the resources that you have, which obviously are very limited at the early stages. And so I think those are kind of the major aspects that we provide in the program that hopefully, create much faster growth. I think Bini's growth was like a 10x or an 8x within 3 or 4 months. I mean, it was pretty amazing. And I give them all the credit for that, but I'm very happy that we were able to potentially make that maybe a little bit more efficient, a little bit quicker, and maybe a little bit less stressful at the end of the day. And so I think that's kind of a snapshot of the support we offer.
I do completely agree with all the topics you mentioned. It is important also to have the network of the founders who can help each other. They also kind of helping in the stress situation and in terms of depression, that helps as well. So Craig, I would love to discuss the markets as well. So you, the markets of your interest are very attractive in terms of the capacity. However, they are very diverse in terms of language, culture, mentality, regulation, type of payments, habits, and so on. How do you work with the team and help your portfolio companies to succeed there? Is part of the Accelerating Asia team based in these countries, or have you found another way to hack the barriers?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think a lot of people are sometimes confused as to how diverse our portfolio is. We don't have any vertical focus. And as you mentioned, we have people from many countries and backgrounds. What we found is that focusing on the stage of the startup, these founders, no matter where they're from or what sort of business they're operating in, typically have very similar challenges and a large overlap in those kind of challenges or gaps. And we know we can help those founders. So I think that's kind of the foundational element of how we hopefully successfully help founders, is mostly from a stage perspective, which we call pre-Series A. And I think ProjectPro coming into the program fit that as well, with a product and market with initially good customer responses to that. And high potential, but still could use some help and some efficiencies to grow faster and get access to the network that we have. And so that's kind of that. Now, of course, each country and each vertical has its own challenges, and that's where we reach out to our mentor network. And so if you have a particular need around fintech, we have a deep bench of strength around fintech ex-founders and people that are in fintech companies or financial resources. The SEO, SEM expert that Bini was mentioning actually is an employee at Binance, which is fintech crypto. And so we have a lot of resources like that to draw on when either me or our entrepreneur in residence, Nash, who I think you guys will hear from later, run out of our own resources. Now to the second part of your question, as far as resources on the ground, we do not have Accelerating Asia employees stationed in these countries. And so our support primarily is through partnerships, our alumni network, and mentors on the ground, as well as investor communities. And so I mentioned that we do have an angel investor support network called Angel 360. Through that, we actually have partnerships with 8 angel networks around the region, which overlap with most of our portfolio companies. And these include hundreds, probably over 1,000 angel investors on the ground in these various different countries. And of course, we work with a lot of the venture capital companies that span across both South and Southeast Asia as well, who are on the ground and are able to provide support as well. But our growing alumni network, both from the previous program we ran and obviously through Accelerating Asia, are also on the ground in these regions. And often these founders who come into our program, they meet some of our alumni from their home country or city. And those relationships last a long time, and they create a lot of support for each other. So I think, if you look at the resources that we have at Accelerating Asia, they're not too different from a startup, but we have massive leverage through our limited partners in our fund, our mentors, and our investor partners, as well as our alumni, who are amazing at staying in touch and continuing to add value to our network even after they graduate.
Thank you, Craig, Bini. Both of you have built successful teams in Southeast Asia and South Asia as well. What is your secret sauce for finding the right team for your startups at early stages and keeping them motivated? A lot of companies are struggling to find the way of successfully managing international teams with different mentalities, cultures, and time zones. This is especially relevant for such a diverse Asian market. So, Craig, can we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, listen, I'm a bit removed from running a startup, so I'll be quick and kind of talk to my experience. I think Binny's experience is much more recent and probably relevant to current times. For me, we imported a lot of talent into Singapore, including a lot of Eastern Europeans and Russians onto the team, and it was extremely diverse. I think we had one of my favorite developers was brought in from Tajikistan. We of course had to navigate some of the immigration rules as far as like importing talent, and of course during COVID it's even harder. So there's a lot more remote these days than there were when I was hiring. I have to say one of the biggest challenges we had as we started scaling from 5 or 10 employees to 30, 40, 50 employees, most of whom were software developers. One of the biggest challenges was effectively managing the resources dedicated to HR and recruiting. At one point, we realized our CTO was spending way too much time on telephone calls with potential hires, and a large majority of those calls ended up being unsuccessful, and it was basically somewhat of a waste of his time. And so we eventually had to create a lot more automation using coding tests, for instance, to filter out folks who were kind of maybe BSing on the CV a little bit or whatever, and create a lot more efficiency to ensure that the candidates that actually got to the human resources level were high quality candidates that we knew had a decent chance of getting in. And so creating that kind of recruitment funnel was a lifesaver for our company, and left a lot of extra time for our developers to actually build and deploy product instead of spending time on phone calls with candidates that weren't worth our time. So that's just a little kind of nugget. The only thing I'd add beyond that is culture. So the best software developers are interested in the most interesting products. Money is usually not the most important piece of it. Obviously you have to pay the bills and it's important, but it's usually not the most important part for the most passionate coders. And so we were one of the first companies in the region to use Golang as a coding language. And we created some leadership around Golang and teaching people how to use Golang and doing workshops, and became kind of a leader around that coding language. And so we had a lot of folks apply because they wanted to learn new languages and do interesting things. And I think my startup itself was kind of boring from a top level as far as the problem we're solving, but the coding was really interesting, and the people that we hired got to learn a lot of new things. We moved people around to run different parts of the infrastructure, and that was really successful in recruiting high quality folks. But again, I think Binni probably has more recent and relevant experience for folks that are hiring right now, so I'll hand it over to him.
Thank you. Binni, could you share your experience?
Yeah, sure, Dina. Thanks, Craig. So, I mean, Dina, anything I have to say on this topic has really come from all the cumulative mistakes you have made in this space. I guess any entrepreneur will say that the best way to really manage a team is to find people who don't have to be managed. That's probably the best team to put together. Now, the way we have gone about doing it and some of the things that have worked for us is, so one, maybe I'll break down into two things. One is culture and the skills themselves. So in terms of the culture, there are a few filters we use. And I'm not saying this works for everybody, but this kind of works for us, which is in interviews, if people ask us things like, what are work timings? Do I have to work 6 days a week, 5 days a week? Things like that are an immediate no. So that's kind of how we do for a culture fit. From a skill fit, I think the most reliable thing that's worked for us is whatever work we are hiring them for, we work with them for a couple of days, a week or a few weeks to do it before we hire. So that's actually what has worked really well for us. We'll say, hey, let's do a 2-week thing together, and we'll pay them for it. And that's worked well from a skills perspective. In terms of finding a pipeline, I think what has worked well for us is actually not doing job posts and things like that, and those are okay. But actually pinging people on LinkedIn, like 300, 400 people, saying, hey, you're really good at this. Is there somebody else you respect I can speak to whom I could hire? That really works for us. In terms of tools, I think our secret tool, if it is LinkedIn InMails. Allocating a large budget to buying InMails to ping people has really helped us. Okay.
Could you also share your mistakes, like the ones in terms of building and growing the right team, which could have been avoided, and what could you suggest to other founders in Southeast Asia on this matter?
Well, I mean, we probably need another 30-minute session for mistakes, but I'll probably highlight one. And the reason I'll highlight this is because it goes contrary to popular advice in this area. See, the popular advice in this area is that if you find somebody really smart, really good, just hire them and you figure it out. You can figure out later what they're going to work on. Now, at our scale, I think we have made some mistakes there, and I think it's fine to hire somebody who's generally very good and all of that, but it's very important to have one thing they're going to focus on, and then they can do other things. So I think that is really important, that you're not just hiring somebody because they're great and amazing and you want them in your team and we'll figure out what they'll do later. I think that's a mistake we made in the past. We don't do that anymore. Yeah, so I think that's important.
Craig, do you have anything to add at this point?
I wish we'd hired a DevOps manager much earlier. The increase in efficiency of our entire tech team once we had a DevOps person to handle all of those pieces of the infrastructure and setting up email accounts and all these things was dramatic. It also more than paid for the salary by lowering our hosting bill with our hosting providers. So depending upon the size of the team you're at, I think right around 10 developers or so, looking into kind of hiring a DevOps manager can definitely pay for itself. And so that's just something to keep in mind as you're hiring. The other piece too that really saved our necks, but we did it probably a little bit too late, was hiring a product manager to kind of translate between the sales team and the tech team. We had a lot of conflict and misunderstandings between those two teams that was, I think, holding us back. And a product manager really helped us kind of get more efficiency and help both sides speak to each other and understand each other a lot more, and created a much more positive culture. And that was something I wish I'd done a little bit earlier. So those are probably two positions I'd look at if you're maybe between 10 and 15 or 10 and 20 devs, is looking at that. Product manager could be even a little bit earlier depending upon your scale and your growth. But that would be maybe something that I would have people take a look into.
Okay, I would love to talk about fundraising a little bit right now. So, Craig, what should startups look out for in order to raise rounds in Southeast Asia?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's more money in Southeast Asia than there ever has been before. If you look at the data, when I was fundraising in 2013, there was about $100 million in total venture capital in the entire region. Recently, that number's gone up to, I think, $8 or $9 billion. Now, certainly a lot of that's allocated towards later stage capital like the Grabs and Gojeks, but there's plenty of money there. And so if you can't get money, it's probably not that there's a lack of money. It's usually a few things. Either number one, there's something wrong with your business model and the investors just don't see the potential, or they don't think that you're the right team. And I don't see enough startups focusing on the team aspect of it. And so investors have a few things they're looking for. And one of them is, is this the right team to execute on this business model? And you really need to do a lot of work to emphasize that. I see a lot of pitch decks where it's just like, oh, Craig Dixon, he majored in finance and he ran this startup. And my startup was a travel startup, but right now I'm doing something with I don't know, solving pet insurance or something like that. Why is Craig in pet insurance? Make sure you tie these things to what you're doing and you explain why you are the right team to be doing this. I think that's a missed opportunity. I see a lot. The big problem one is one that everyone kind of, focuses on, and that's good. The third one I don't see founders focus on enough is why now? Why is now the right time for your product to have exponential growth over the next 3, 5, and 10 years? Especially when you're talking to venture capitalists. This is a 10-year relationship. Their fund life cycle is 10 years. They're investing in you and they're expecting an exit in the next 5 or 8 years. So what you're doing today is great. But what are the trends? So there's internal trends, which is what you're doing with your business and what you might do with the capital you get. What are the external trends in the market that are putting a wind at your back that mean that every time you make one step forward, that wind pushes you 2 or 3 steps forwards? And these can be things like demographics, increasing middle class, rising purchasing power. There's a number of different variables, technological advantages or technological advances that are coming to market, adoption of smartphones and things like this. So why now is something that I think is missed a lot. You could literally have a slide that says why now and put some data on there. The last point I'll make that I see a lot of startups not do so well is they're not quantitative enough. So when you say that there's a problem to be solved, quantitate that. So, our potential customers are spending 3 hours a day doing X. And if they used our solution, they will save 2 out of those 3 hours. That's the type of quantitative results you need for an investor to create a specific value proposition and attach a dollar figure to it. And also understand the specific value you're giving to the customer, compare that to the price you're charging and see what the value is, and kind of have an idea of what sort of monetization can be made with your product. So I think I could go on forever on this topic because this is something I do a lot with and I focus on forever. So I'll stop there, but hopefully there's a few tips in there that can help some of the founders that are listening to maybe do a better job of talking about their startups and their pitch decks as well.
These are actually useful tips for any market. Thank you for sharing. Binni, what is your opinion about the access to venture capital in Southeast Asia and India?
Yeah, Dina, maybe I can probably speak a little more to the India context. See, just like what Craig said, I mean, the numbers are all pretty amazing. I think India has 30 or 32 unicorns. A few years back, that number was in the low single digits, and this number is just climbing every week. Nobody even really knows how many unicorns are in India right now. I feel, but I do feel, just like Craig mentioned, which is, saying that there is 10 billion available or 20 billion available is like saying that, oh, the edtech market is worth 20 billion. That's not very helpful to an entrepreneur. Yes, the money is there, but you have to find your own unique path to go get that with a unique product, a pricing position. I think the same thing applies to raising money as well. I think one of the things that worked well for us is to build long-term relationship with investors and kind of involve them in the company building process at some level. So that really helped us. The second thing I would say helps the process is kind of a very high leverage activity is to be just extremely close to your customer, because that just tends to come out in various aspects, even unknowingly. So I think these two were the high leverage things that kind of helped our process. So yeah, yes, the money is there, but it's not the easiest thing to go get it. You have to find your unique path to go get it.
Completely agree. Thank you, Binni and Craig. We do have a few questions from the audience. So Craig, could you share the industries you're actually interested in and eager to invest?
I am interested in all industries. So I'm sorry if that's a terrible answer. We're really focused more on the founders and the problems that are being solved and the opportunity to become a really large company. And we love companies that sit at the intersection of business and impact. So, ideally, there's an impact component to it. I think most startups are creating impact just because of their, creating value and efficiencies anyway. But we have startups in all different verticals. I think in a current context, what verticals are kind of sexy that everyone's attracted to and not just us is e-commerce, medtech, and edtech are three I'd probably mention as, recently have increased in perceived value. And a lot of that is because of, the COVID context and moving things online at a much faster rate. And dramatic increases in investment by governments and other organizations into medical. So those are some things that are driving it. I think fintech has consistently been a favorite of investors, especially at more mature stages. And we also have a number of fintech that's coming in. We're starting to get a lot of interesting things. It's a little bit early into kind of the DeFi and kind of blockchain crypto space. And we're really interested in that and kind of poking around in there. I think, we're a little bit early there, but there's some really interesting stuff there. But at the end of the day, yeah, we don't have specific vertical focus at all. It's really about, awesome founders solving really tough problems that are creating value for everybody. And, we love impact as well. So yeah, leave it there.
Time flies. We do have a few more questions, but I will be able to ask only one. Do you also use the model of Antler or Entrepreneur First once working with the startups?
We're quite different to those programs. I think we kind of operate as partners. So Entrepreneur First and Antler typically get founders that are individual people that want to be founders and have them meet other folks and become co-founders and then create a startup and a product. We have a lot of Antler and EF startups who apply to our program after those programs because we sit a little bit more mature than those programs. and then the VCs kind of sit above us, right? So I think we do operate a little bit differently, and we have a different modus operandi. As I mentioned earlier, we're looking for startups that already have a full team and a product and market with traction. And so that's a little bit different. We're more of an accelerator, whereas I think those companies are really taking individuals with really good CVs and high potential to meet each other and create a founding team. And so we kind of, we have different models, and we have different ways of executing on our model. So I think it would be quite a different experience for a founder going through that program versus ours. But they're very reputable, and we're really happy to have them in the market, generating new companies that we can hopefully help accelerate down the road and connect into the VCs.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Bini. It was a really insightful discussion, and thank you for finding the time to join us at the last minute. If you have the context which could be used by the audience, if they still have the question to ask, please feel free to share with us, and we will share with the audience as well. Mihail, I will let you talk.
Yep. Thank you so much for your speech.